Good afternoon. What is a warm, grey and cloudy day? It is Thursday, the 14th of August. I'm in the reading up with a nice hot cup of tea. And got a thick package to unbox. Let's get this open. What I've got here is, so look, down there, the 2000 AD Years, Volume 2, with introduction by Garth Ennis. So, I'm a bit not happy about the damage to the book, but the veteran space pilot Dan Dare continues his 2000 AD adventures through a hostile universe together with his hardened crew. Dan pilots the mighty space fortress into battle against the most dangerous entities in the galaxy has to offer, including giant water worms, not influenced by Dune there, an evil doppelganger, and the terrifying menace of the Mekon, because always the Mekon. Known amongst the 2000 AD fans for its controversial non-ending, this volume features the iconic artwork of Britain's first comics laureate, Dave Gibbons. So, this is the second volume. It's collecting, second and final volume, and it's collecting the last of the content which appeared in the pages of 2000 AD. Having come across from an earlier comic, essentially at the point being that essentially there was a bit of an amalgamation of sort of like different science fiction and action comics during the late 70s, with 2000 AD sort of like adopting different comics and their characters into its long-running array of titles. I think it might have come across from Star-Lord, I think, because I'm remembering back almost 50 years. But then again, Dan Dare is older than that. I mean, by the time he was appearing in the pages of 2000 AD, he would have been 25 years old as a comic book character, having originated in the pages of the Eagle, where very much space opera, very much very stylized. The look of the science fiction and so on. If you've ever seen any of the comics from that period, you'll know what I mean. Not quite yet influenced by the science fiction that would come as a result of the Russian and American science fiction space programs. So Dan Dare is really very much an icon of the 50s, so 70 years old, and part of the problem with this is that there isn't much in the way of sort of like carryover today. I don't think he's a particularly recognised or known about figure, apart from sort of like a certain older generation, whether they grew up during the 50s like my father did, or became aware of Dan Dare essentially in the late 70s, early 80s with these comic strips. So let's have a look at this. So we have introduction by Garth Ennis. This is from 2016 when the collection was put together. And we get straight into Doppelganger, and you've got essentially a front page of 2000 AD. This is basically Prague 52, February 1978. So this is 1978. So essentially, we are barely 50 issues a year into the run of 2000 AD, and we are beginning to come to the end of Dan Dare in the comic. And like all of the comics of the period, you've got the vibrancy of that front cover, followed by basically some absolutely terrific black and white artwork. Because you have to remember, sort of like, oh no, all the comics in the past used to be black and white, and that's pretty much true, because it's, printing in colour was an expensive process. And still, you get some absolutely terrific artwork. I mean, this is fantastic. Honestly, really clean clear lines, captures great visuals, and it's full of action. I mean, look at that. And you have some people today going, oh, I don't read the stuff from the past because it's all in black and white. But look at this. You know, all right, the cover is colour, but honestly, just fantastic colour. Sorry, fantastic sort of like, you know, just fantastic action, fantastic detail, you know, superb artistry, you know, draftsmanship, if what you ever want to call it. Really very, very good. Now, a lot of this I would have been reading occasionally because essentially I wasn't a subscriber to 2000 AD, and I probably wasn't a subscriber to 2000 AD until the very late 80s, early 90s, when I was sort of living on my own, and you know, I wanted to buy it every week. They were caught up with a lot of the classic tales in collections and also American reprints, but that didn't include Down There. And the other thing about this is just in comparison, just how dynamic these stories would have been in comparison to the very more stagey kind of style you would have got in the pages of the Eagle comic, you know, classic boys comic, great artwork from the 50s into the 60s, but yeah. And of course the subject matters would be very different, you know. Obviously much darker, a little bit grim and gritty, I suppose, as you can see from, hopefully see from the artwork. And that would have come out of certainly an element of the, I suppose, the punk sensibility and the culture of the 70s as well. Because one of the big influences upon 2000 AD, of course, was Action Comic, which is essentially all about writing action and adult-toned stories, but for teenage boys. I mean, you look at Hookjaw, something like that. You know, it's stories like that that got Action Comic into trouble, and ultimately it's cancellation. But that style continued into the pages of 2000 AD, but hid it under a satire. So we've got the next story, Nightmare Planet. So yeah, so you've got that sort of kind of tone continuing on, much toned down, but still there. And here, supposedly, the other thing is here, the development again of the ongoing story, and sort of like other stories being more prominent means that don't have the splash pages of colour for some issues. So here's obviously for part 2 of the Nightmare Man, but it's in the back of the comic. It's not getting full colour treatment on any of its pages at this point. But that doesn't mean that it's still not an interesting story, it's not being well told, and it's not being fantastically presented, and so on. So yeah, here we've got kind of a classic piece of 2000 AD Dave Gibbons artwork, which you've kind of seen in a lot of his other things like Harlem Heroes and, you know, the other stories that he drew throughout this period. So I'm just going to flip through this now, because obviously, you know, this is what you really want to look at, this fantastic artwork. Much of this I've not seen in 40 odd years. I may not even seen at all, because I say my reading of 2000 AD was not consistent. So yeah, and yeah, essentially we've got continuing story, new story here, New Earth. Kind of a classic sort of like, you know, science fiction story of explorers finding a planet which looks exactly like the Earth, populated by humans and so on, or appears to be. And here it's populated by Puritans. Whether that is the Puritans of the 13 colonies in North America, or the Puritans of the Civil War is another matter. And here we discover the Garden of Eden, and it's not what it looks like. And you've got classic big bug, giant worms as well. And next story, Mutiny. So this runs to just trying to see where we've got page count. It doesn't actually have a page count, but it's, as you see, it's quite a hefty, thick book. Our next story, The Doomsday Machine. I really like these frontispieces you're getting for each of the different stories, and these feel look sort of like more new. Essentially kind of separating the stories, but giving sort of like a nice break between giving a nice break between the stories where they don't have full colour covers, as in, you know, essentially they're not, the stories aren't being announced on the front cover as a feature. I mean, throughout this period, you know, Down There will be competing for sort of like with space with other stories, Judge Dredd, Strontium Dog, and many others. I mean, some of them are absolutely classic stories from the period. So quite a lot of big worm-like creatures without teeth appearing in these stories. And this has got like a much darker feel to it, much more shadow. So, moving on, we have Servant of Evil, and here we've got the return of Dan Dare's nemesis, the Mekon. Always a threat to him, and ever since he discovered him on the planet of Venus. This is originally written, of course, before we knew what Venus was truly like. Venus, originally in Dan Dare's stories, was a divided planet by a great heat barrier, just like north and south hemispheres, and you have sort of like an idealized sort of like utopia on one side, and then on the other side it was all dominated by the autocracy of the Mekong. You know, kind of a classic green, big-brained alien dictator. This is Death in Space. So yeah, just say flipping through, just showing you some of the fantastic artwork. But if you're looking for some kind of classic space opera, Tales is worth tracking down and reading and enjoying. Because ultimately, really this would have been not quite Dan Dare's last hurrah, because since there's been an attempt at a television series, a surprisingly good, fun, entertaining radio series. But Dan Dare has very much faded from the public consciousness. Never really benefited from a film or proper television series. You know, imagine what it would have been like if Jerry Anderson had adapted some of the Dan Dare stories for Super Mario Nation. He would be far more well known. And so, classic Earth boring machine there. Seen that in lots of science fiction, you know, straight out of, you know, that Journey to the Centre of the Earth almost, the film version, or straight at the Earth's core. I mean, with, you know, it's a classic film with Doug McClure, and then we also got, you know, again, Thunderbirds. So yeah, coming to the end of, you know, what is a really fantastic, you know, collection. Great chance to read these all in one place without going back and tracking them down. I mean, the only thing you are losing here is you're not reading them in context of what the other stories were being told around these strips, but it doesn't matter. We've also got a change there of sort of like the typeface for Dan Dare. Doesn't, I mean you go back to just to that's the classic there, and you change to this. I mean, it's very kind of 70s sort of like, and you kind of go, doesn't quite work. And so here we come down to essentially the very last page where Tharg says farewell, but there is more. We've got some bonus strips. So we've got an untitled strip there in colour, again with a different font typeface for the title. and these are much rougher. Sorry, rougher. And we've also got a short story. Or two. So yeah, it's quite nice with some nice bits of bonus content. And another strip. And it's absolutely great to see these as well, because otherwise, you know, these would have sat in the archives of Rebellion, unseen. But that's the amazing thing about Rebellion, that it does have the treasury of British comics, and it is supporting original and new content. You know, it's reprinted all of the original tales of the Trigon Empire, which is really, really great stuff, and brought out new stuff as well. So then we bring up to come up a bit more to date with Down Dare 3000 AD. This is a bit new to me as well. And so got much more modern treatment of the character. This is very very late 90s, 80s, I suppose. Look, and perhaps no longer Dare. You know, essentially when Down Dare left 2000 AD. Look back, a little bit of retrospective about some of the artwork, and that's the classic look. That's the classic look for the characters when they're spaceship, and I can't remember her name, but that's Digby. Digby is you know, basically from Lancashire, and would always talk about, you know, how his grandmother wouldn't like this, and then Uek was his catchphrase. Some other renditions here of Down Dare, and that's more Flash Gordon, if I'm honest. And then we've got covers as well there at the end. And details of the writers and artists. So that's a superb collection. I'm really glad I've got this, so I can actually probably read the whole lot when I've got time, and enjoy, you know, just some nostalgia in some of the comics of my past, which I didn't quite get to read. Well, I do hope you enjoyed this unboxing in the Nook. A bit long, I'm afraid, but there we go. If you did, then please do click on the like button down below. And of course, if you've got any comments or feedback, I do appreciate you taking the time to post those. And lastly, if you want to be alerted to get more unboxings in the Nook, where you'll see me out here with a package containing, in this case, or typically a role-playing game supplement or scenario, but in this case, a comic book collection from the pages of 2000 AD, which I will unbox and chat about to the best extent of my knowledge for roughly 10 minutes or so, all of course accompanied by a nice hot cup of tea. Then please do click on the subscribe button down below. Thanks again for watching. Be back again soon with another one. Bye for now.